Yes.
What I tell you, that last show was awesome. Welcome back to Enfield Today. We are doing part 2 of the history of Enfield, trying to squeeze 400 plus years into an hour show. So it's a little difficult, but boy, are we having fun. I want to introduce again my same guests, Tom Arnone and Bill Friday. Tom, Town Council, Bill from the Enfield Historical Society. Right away, we're going to go to a video that we shot the other day, and it's a little clip of what we talked about earlier of Bill and I are going to be sitting on the pew up there, and we're looking at the floor, but there used to not be a floor. And so we're going to show a little bit of what that, will look like. And then we got some photographs, some slides to show you guys. So take a look, see what you think.
Right.
So they would look down at the preacher or whoever it was, and like you said, so what were those coal things like? What were they, little buckets? And they put them down and they just sit close to each other?
Yeah, they were
We were
just
talking
very
about
close. Like we said, the services were pretty long, so yeah, they had to keep warm. So.
Yeah, so we were talking about right there was the little thing to keep us warm. We got some random footage that we're watching now of like they need a new mattress. They should come see me for that.
That's the
mattress, man.
The children's room.
But
behind the pillow there's a stone bed warmer.
Right, and then we're looking at some of the period dresses. And what are we?
That's the Bigelow ex-minister loom.
Okay.
That was,
and the Ediphone.
Yeah. Which was a dictating machine. And then the small machine was a check writer. This is the addressograph, and then we have the polling.
The voting machines.
This is Bigelow's designer's office where they design carpets. And we have some church furniture.
Wheelchair, yeah.
That's some wheelchairs.
I mean, and all these items, all these items can be found inside the old town hall, so you can see 400 years of history in the old town hall from the beginning almost up till now. And you guys in the Historical Society did an incredible amount of work to put this all together to make this what it is, because 15, 20 years ago that building was about ready to go, and just some of the old milk bottles from way back when, and they all say Enfield on them, and this is just so neat. There's so much stuff in there. Dinosaur tracks.
There we go.
Found right here in town.
Yep,
Cool.
200
from way back
million
in the
years
day.
ago, and sedimentary bedrock.
Yep.
What they called the Hartford Basin of the Connecticut River Valley.
A lot of Hazardville stuff from Augustus Hazard, and how all what was it? All of the gunpowder, or most of the gunpowder from the Civil War was made here in town.
12,500 pounds a day they produced for the Civil War.
And that's
just
crazy.
Hazard.
Both sides too, right?
No, what happened there was the South was getting aware there might be one, and so he was selling powder before the war, but after the war he was dedicated to the Union or whatever. So
we had so much, like he was just, I guess making money at the time, and before it got too crazy, and just we didn't realize that if you drive down by where the old barn is, they were making gunpowder there to be used in the Civil War.
140 buildings, 70 of them were directly related to making the powder.
It's crazy. It's so neat, and some of those foundations of those buildings can be found up there.
Still explored today.
Yeah, it's so neat, and you go there, and like I said, what was it like 150 years ago at that point when guys were going to work their lunch pails? Explosions took place down there. People, unfortunately passed because of it's gunpowder, and there's bound to be mistakes every once in a while. I want to spend a few minutes though, because this is something that a lot of us don't realize what happened in town. And you guys both are very knowledgeable on the whole Jonathan Edwards and what he did and where he came from. Speak of that a little bit, Bill. You start.
Well, his father was Timothy Edwards, and his mother's name was maiden name was Stoddard. They were Jonathan Edwards grew up in South Windsor. He was one of 11 children. The last one, the only boy.
Right.
Went to Yale when he was 13 years old. Had an experience where it changed his whole life. In the Age of Enlightenment, John Locke had written the book on understanding the human condition. And throughout Edward's life, that was his cornerstone of how he preached. And he not only that, but he was a philosopher. And
right, and you can go right now on Enfield Street, and there's a marker outside of the Montessori school. I believe that's where it is, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Right on Enfield Street.
Right next to it. Yeah.
And see where he stood, and what did he speak about?
Yeah. Well, it was what today is considered fire and brimstone.
Right.
But he didn't preach that way. He was very calm, very to the point type of preacher. So they called it something that it really wasn't. But you have to get a real feel for the time and the time period. The time period was 40 years after the Salem witch trials. There was a lot of colonial gossip between neighbors, a lot of political problems where people would actually get into serious trouble in their villages. So he started to preach a thing of devotion to God, where the taverns would close, your gripes with your neighbors would be no more, and that was his philosophy, was to start getting back into touch with God and your neighbor.
And people responded to that.
And people responded. It was a revolution and it was funny because the conservative, at times, the conservative parts of the church didn't like it. They didn't think it was. He was very criticized as being, somewhat of a fringe.
And he went and did this in Enfield, but he did it in other,
all over New England.
And
yes.
it started here in town.
Yes.
Another thing that started here in town. And I remember I was watching the History Channel one night, and I don't even remember what the show was, but it was different segments of history, and they brought it up, and they show Enfield Street. I'm like, wait a minute, that looks like Enfield Street. And it was.
And they showed the stone.
And it was, and the stone. I wish we had a picture of it. We should have got that. But it's right there, right outside the Montessori school, and people can come and they can take a look at it and stand where he stood. It's just
and he loved science. Going through Yale, he was his favorite was science, and it was very contradictory to his religion. So at the same time, he always fought those two passions. And then that time when he found his calling and devoted himself to the Lord. It was profound, and I thanks to the show and the Historical Society, I really get it, because again, you have to look at the period that he was preaching, and you could really feel today that same type of passion that was something that the human race is a little lenient on today.
It's crazy.
Love thy neighbor.
Love thy neighbor. Speaking
the name of that speech was "Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God."
Correct.
Right.
And with the
do have a few quotes.
The religion stuff, a part of that. We're going to go to another video now, where another very interesting religion, I don't want to say cult, but a religion devotion here in Enfield took place, is the Shakers. Let's watch that video. Shaker era of Enfield. This is some amazing stuff, and we have like 6 minutes in this room and around us some real items that they did and they made that they left for us to have. Take a look. Now, the Shakers were an interesting religious cult, and what I was saying before a little bit, kind of joking, but not, when I say they're self-defeating, is how they, well, we'll explain that in a little bit, but some of the workmanship of what we saw, that it's incredible the amount of work that they put in, and the way these things last forever because of the quality of them. And tell us a little bit about the Shakers and what I mean about self-defeating.
Yeah, they were first called the United Society of Believers. Then after that, they were called the Shaking Quakers. And it was because of this, they would go into this routine of dancing and speaking in tongues and shaking, and And so then it finally became just Shakers.
Right.
The Shakers were founded by Ann Lee. She was the founder of it, and she came from England in 1744, moved up to New York, and started one of the villages there. Now, what the villages? Well, we'll go to Enfield, and in 1793, the first Shaker village opened in Enfield. And what they did was they were in a church, north, east, south, and west families. And when they mean families, they mean brothers and sisters.
Right.
And what they would do is they'd appoint an elder, 2 elders and 2 eldresses, and those elders would appoint 2 deacons and 2 deaconesses and 2 trustees. So each family had their own hierarchy. Mm-hmm. Now, the principle that Ann Lee based her foundation on was that hands to work, hearts to God. And the other, striving to do everything that you do to perfection. Now, she preached purity. So when she preached purity, that brought it into celibacy.
Correct. That's what I was talking about, self-defeating. Because they couldn't have relations, if you will, so no kids.
They kind of like self-contained themselves, and they called the outside world whatever. So they were.
So here's a question though: if they couldn't, have children, like, how did they recruit?
Sure. What happened was, in those days, there was no orphanages or homes for children. So they would, the town would bring the children to the Shakers. And the Shakers would educate them. They would care for them. They would train them. And then when they became age of majority, they would go to them and say, do you want to stay or do you want to leave?
Oh.
So then whatever, some would stay and some would leave. The other thing about it is that some people just can't make it in the outer world there or whatever.
Right.
And they're looking for something different.
Sure.
They go there and they find that it's to their liking, that the regimentation of it. So, so they would get... but then later on, when the community started to build orphanages, and there was also like, say, where unfit parents, there might be children that would go there. Right.
Problems that we have today, we had then.
Sure. And then, then the community started to build orphanages, and it was growing where jobs were more available. So if they didn't want that strict religious life or whatever, they could. So the decline in the Enfield, at one time they had 240 Shakers there. And at the end, in 1913, when they disbanded, there was 2 people left.
That's crazy.
So,
and there's an Enfield, New Hampshire, where they went there as well.
Sure.
And what's neat about the Shakers is if you go up by the prisons, a lot of the buildings that the prison uses are Shaker buildings that are still standing to this day. You're going to drive right up Shaker Road, get it? And then there you go.
They were self-sufficient in that they had they did dairy, they did farming, they did made bonnets, all kinds of crafts. So in the furniture making was where the quality really showed.
Oh my goodness.
And that was, and even the buildings, if you looked at the buildings, they were very simplistic.
Yeah.
But they were built for
they'll last.
winter.
Yeah. This stuff is just so neat to me. I know I keep saying that, but it is. You can feel it. Just like what you guys were saying, because you guys get it, because a lot of people don't get it. One of the neat things, though, that we didn't talk about in that video that Tom just reminded me of, tell me a little bit about the Shakers, like, being run out of town. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, they didn't get a great reception when they first came here. As a matter of fact, there was a Captain Charles Kibbe. I don't know if there's any relation, but
no.
he led about 20 to 30 men into their first meeting and drove them out and actually busted up the house.
Oh, that's just great.
And drove them out. And even when they were tried later, they would not back down, and they took their fines as opposed to taking confessing that what they had done was wrong.
Right.
They took the fines instead. So they were steadfast on this, and it actually didn't happen but once, but twice. They were run out, and the second time they were threatened to be tarred and feathered because that was not something from TV. They literally would.
And they did that.
Well, what happened?
And I know that they, we joke. Well, we don't joke about it, but you see that on, like on movies or whatnot, and they actually tarred and feathered these people.
Not a pretty thing.
Ann Lee was a firebrand. She wasn't nice, no. And when she went into the village or whatever, she spoke very poorly of the women of the, and she wasn't well liked.
Well, I can imagine. I mean.
Actually, she was beaten.
Why? I didn't know that.
Yeah, and she died 6 months after that.
Oh my goodness!
But it wasn't here. It was in New Lebanon,
New Hampshire,
New York, on the border.
I mean, you can imagine you're living your life, doing whatever it is you're doing, and all of a sudden there's this group of people trying to, come in and change things, and I can understand that at the time, how it wasn't well perceived. But I don't know about running in and tearing them up.
But they came back and they were very persistent, and people finally recognized it, learned to live with it, and it's actually what a wonderful bit of Enfield history we have. And we don't have access to it anymore, which is a shame because of the prison property that it's on. With the tour, we wanted to take the bus tour down the street, found out can't do that because the prison won't allow it.
That's too bad because those are original Shaker buildings. Yes. They're not replicas. They're not just the real deal. And it's too bad that we can't see them, but.
Earlier when we saw that bellows in the basement of the museum, that came from what they called Trip Hammer Pond, which is now Crescent Lake. And the Shakers had a blacksmith shop there. So that's where that bellows came from.
And also, like we talked about a little bit on the video, they did good things because a lot of the, I don't know a lot, but there were some orphans and things like that people didn't know what to do with, that the Shakers took in and raised and educated these kids, and so they ended up providing a pretty good service, to the community.
And the ones that stayed were so grateful that, they weren't going to go anywhere. They got their choice when they reached the age of majority. They could either decide to leave the community or stay.
Now, if they decided to leave, were they ostracized by the community, or could they come back and visit?
No, not at all. Not at all. They were very welcoming people. They had in the wintertime, men would go out there, and the Shakers knew they were going to leave when it's spring. They just wanted, so they called them winter Shakers. Black
so
or
they could
white,
go and stay warm and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And being with the oath of celibacy, they had to keep their population up. So that was a good way too for the orphans to take the orphans in, and people to come into the religion also to keep it moving, keep it going.
That's just, it's so neat, and it's so much stuff, and that's all about Shaker Road.
Yep.
But
you could visit one in New Hampshire today, which is open to the public if you'd like to see how they actually live. I wish that was our museum and not theirs, but
and it should be.
And it should be.
And it should be
because
ours,
we
were
were there in the beginning with Meacham being an Enfield resident that opened his home and brought her down here from England. With the Shaking Quakers. It started because during the religious ceremony they would do almost Pentecostal, where they would start shaking in belief.
We're gonna do a little weird thing here. We're gonna go around a circle. We're gonna go back to a little bit of Enfield prehistory. All right, and we got a good video that I took with Bill on that. Let's watch that. So Bill, what's neat about all this is, what was Enfield like before it was Enfield?
Very interesting. Yeah. 16,000 years ago, the last ice age went through here, and by 14,000 years it had dissipated, and Native Americans started moving into this area because of the fertile soils and the fishing capabilities.
Oh, sure.
In Enfield itself, there was two tribes that I can identify: the Pecumtuck tribe from Western Massachusetts.
Okay.
It's a tongue twister.
Yeah, but they all were though.
And I believe they settled in the Hazardville section.
Okay.
And there was two Thompson brothers that lived in Enfield that used to go down to the hazard grounds or whatever, and they discovered what they think was the base of the tribe,
wow,
where there was all kinds of religious artifacts,
right,
and so they donated to Yale University. It's now displaying the Natural History Museum at Yale University, which was pretty cool. The other tribe was the Scannick tribe, named after, I think the Indians call it Scantuck. I've seen different names.
Right.
We call it the Scannick River.
Just like the river.
So, and what it was is Chief Skiddacoe was the head of the Scannick Indians. And and again, well, what you see around here was the artifacts.
Yeah.
These particular artifacts were donated by the Yeager family. And their grandfather's farm, less than a quarter of a mile from here, that's where these artifacts came from.
That's so interesting.
And then he was gracious enough to donate them to us for the museum.
And what's neat too, like we were saying before, is not so often anymore, but people are still finding Indian heads up and down the Connecticut River, if you get lucky. Or on Kings Island, there's still a lot of stuff out there. There was a gentleman on Facebook who I saw some photos of things he found metal detecting out on Kings Island. It's just mind-blowing to me.
Here, Kevin? Okay.
All right, so we're talking about something else.
Right. That'd be for another show.
For another show that we didn't even plan on.
The paranormal show.
Paranormal. Anyways, you're going back to the beginning with the Ice Age and all this other stuff, and there's so much about the four. What were you saying, Bill? There was 4 Indian tribes way back when.
Well, there's 2 that I've documented: Pecumtuck Indians from Western Mass, and then there was the Podunk Indians that were really in South Windsor or whatever. But what was the Skiddacoe? Chief Skiddacoe.
And that's
was
where
that's where Skiddacoe come from.
So where present-day Indian Run is also was a very large tribe there, and that's probably where it ended up getting its name. Yes, and that was part of the Skiddacoe tribe, all through Powder Hollow and then up through Indian Run. And they said that was quite a large area and tribe right there.
Well, I can only imagine. Yeah. And how they interacted, again, going back with the original folks that came here, I guess they were friendly to a point.
Yeah.
You know.
There was policy of this. There was policy of Springfield was to learn the language, make friends with the Native Americans, trade with them, because they knew enemies weren't going to work. Trade partners were. So they're really the first capitalists. I go back to the Pynchons again. They were very smart in their business with the Native Americans, which was.
I can't wait until you do your traveling show.
Yeah, the tour is going to come back again with the cultural arts. They in partnership with the Enfield Historical Society, because that's where we end up at the museum at the end.
Now, do you know when? Approximately even?
Soon.
Okay.
So we
I'm
haven't
not pinning you down on a date.
We haven't put a date on it. And that's, we talk about ancient history too, because that's how the tour starts, by the Connecticut River, where we talk about the Wisconsin glacier, almost a mile worth of ice sitting on top of Enfield, and that's where we have all that ripping and tearing at the valleys and gullies and rocks that are strewed out. And once the glacier retreated, Rocky Hill was a dam from all the rocks that fell from the glacier.
Really?
It flooded this area, and we were a lake for the longest time.
Oh my goodness!
And at the time when the Wisconsin glacier was here, and all the people were coming in from Europe, which are today's Native Americans, the camels and horses were leaving North America, which they originated in North America. So camels were here first. They went to Europe, and man finished them off here in North America as food.
Never would have been.
So that's new. That's new science that's coming out. So then they, for 10,000 years, Native Americans have lived here in Connecticut, which I found just astonishing that how small of a frame we are in this state.
Now, if somebody's watching, where would they go if somebody watches? Say, you know what, I'm curious about this now. I know EnfieldHistoricalSociety.org is a good start, but where could they go besides the old town hall? Obviously, that's like this hot spot.
The library.
Yeah. Well, we have the Facebook too. Enfield Historical Society Facebook.
Yep, there's a good Facebook page. We've got a good YouTube page, by the way. You can go to YouTube and look up YouTube/ just look up Enfield Today, and you can see all of our videos. This one's going to be on there. The part 2 will be on there, part 1 and part 2. And just give me the hours one more time for the Old Town Hall, the Martha Parsons, the Wallop School.
Wallop School is 2 to 4, one Sunday a month. And you can look that up on there and the calendar on the website to get the actual. So there's 4 days there. But Old Town Hall and Martha Parsons are open from 2 to 4:30. From the 3rd week of May to last week of October. I did want to mention, Kevin, that recently we digitized the Enfield High School yearbook.
Yes, you did.
All the way back to 1919.
Yeah.
They're now available on archive.com.
Mr. Ellis did a heck of a job on that.
Yeah.
Just everybody did a heck of a job on that. And Tom, I'm going to give you like a minute. What do you want to? Is there anything you want to address before we wrap up?
Well, I'll give a plug to the library too. They want to start a program and get a part of the library that's dedicated to history. So look for that coming up in the future. They would like to really show the Yale photograph collection, which was another one, and the library has a great amount of books. That's where I got a lot of my information too. From many books that were published on Enfield. People have no idea we're out there. A couple of them you can't publish at the time. But look out for the historical tour. It'll be coming to our town near us, and we'll announce it in the newspaper soon.
It'll be in the newspaper. It's going to be on Facebook. I'll make sure that gets into the forum, and everybody's going to know about this.
Probably need a bigger bus. So.
Right? I hope we need 2 buses because it was so interesting to actually, because you're not only just driving around, but you're stopping and you're seeing. And you're showing specific things and things you can touch that were there 250 years ago, 400 years ago. I just want to take a second to thank Tom and thank Bill. You guys have been awesome on this show, and I appreciate it so much. And I want to thank everybody for watching. There's so much history. We touched on a lot of it, but there's so much more. So guys, thank you very much. We'll see you next time on Enfield Today. Take care.